Hello, Mai. This is a video to give you some feedback on your assignment 2 on comprehensive approach. I'm going to be talking about two things. One is the global level of your text, and the other is the local level of your text. Now, what this means is that the local level has to do with the structure that you've chosen for your text, how you compose it, the order in which you've placed the different elements, and how those hang together, and how clear your communication is as a result of your structure. The local level is at the other end of the scale. That's your choice of words, your command of the English language, like grammar, vocabulary, syntax, those types of things. I'm going to begin with the global level, the structure of your text. I would say in general, there is a fairly good coherence. However, you need to be more aware of how you communicate to your reader. Your reader in this case is not your teacher. That's a common mistake that we make, is that we write for a specific reader because we know that someone's going to be marking the thing that we write. From a communicative standpoint, you need to think of someone who is educated, able to understand an argument, but doesn't have the specific knowledge that you have. And the reason for this is that we want you to be explicit about how you arrive at your conclusions, what information you choose to include in your paper, how well you're able to define concepts. I will say every now and again, you use abbreviations, for instance, that you don't explain. You sometimes also reference things that are sort of like that an insider would know, and you need to make those explicit. And this is regardless of what genre you're writing in, even if it's a strictly military genre, the first time you use an abbreviation, you write it in full, and then you can use it further down as an abbreviation. And if you refer to things that haven't been determined previously, and the reader might have to, go to an external source to find out about, that's really going to annoy that reader, regardless of who you're aiming your text at. So just keep that in mind, that you have a reader that's not just your teacher, but like a fictional readership outside of the actual task that you're doing, if that makes sense. So introduce the text. Tell the reader why you're writing it. There is some kind of coherence between the task of defining the Danish contribution to Inherent Resolve, defining the comprehensive approach as we know it from NATO, and then assessing how comprehensive the future Danish contribution and the present one will be. Those three elements that you're asked to deal with here have a connection. Make that clear in your introduction, because then the reader knows what to expect, and it makes it so much easier to follow. If I hadn't known all these things in advance, I would have struggled with your text, and that's just unnecessary. And you can tweak it. It's not about revising your text in a great way, but just to tweak and frame it a little bit more. So introducing it is one way of doing it. Also, rounding it off so that we know, okay, so what is it that we now can say about the comprehensive approach in terms of a future contribution to Inherent Resolve? What is it that you think in conclusion? And then when you write, you can do what's called signposting. So make sure that the reader understands that in parts of the text you're referring to what has already been deployed. And then you're defining a somewhat tricky concept of the comprehensive approach, which is different from how we have done it, but there's not a very clear consensus, but there are some issues that we can define, or some things that we can define. That's a different way of writing from writing about facts. And then you go into your assessment. That's a more argumentative style of writing. So make sure that it's known to the reader. You don't have to be sort of, now I'm going to tell you the facts, and now I'm going to define, and now I'm going to discuss. But you can phrase that in different ways, so that the reader knows what is going on. So that we're looking for, in the description, we're looking for facts, but in the argument, we're looking for how strong your support for your argument is, so that we know that this is what is happening in the text, and this is how we assess the text's credibility. So that's to do with considering your reader. Getting into the sort of more technical stuff about your text. When you write your paragraphs, I want you to be more aware of the message in the individual paragraph. Ideally, you have one message per paragraph, one clear, rather simple message per paragraph. So you can express that, and it's often expressed in what's called a topic sentence. If you Google that, you'll find loads and loads of resources on how to structure a really good paragraph. So one clear message, and support that sufficiently in the paragraph, either with facts or statistics or references to external sources, or just basically build your argument. If it's your point of view you're trying to get across, and build your argument. Why do you think A, B, and C? Because so and so and so. So that's what you're looking for. And I think you should have a read through of your text and see how many of your paragraphs can live up to that ideal. If you get the hang of it, a systematic way of writing paragraphs, you will, I think, find it much easier to write, basically, because it's just, you have this building block that you need to create, and then you put one on top of the other, and you just go, you write. And the same goes for writing in Danish, obviously. It's the same principle. Okay, so that was all to do with the global level. Moving into the local, where it's about your language and your command of the English language. You are a little bit fuzzy in terms of what it is you're actually trying to say in certain places. So you're not quite in command of the language at all times. So that suggests to me that you need some practice. I've noticed things like your punctuation, I think commas more than anything, choice of words that is a little bit off in terms of what a native speaker would say. There's no communication breakdowns. You are able to say what you want, but you seem a bit uncertain and a bit unclear in places. A way to kind of work on that is time-consuming but quite easy, is basically to expose yourself to lots and lots of writing, so you can imitate. Usually we cope with the amount of English that we see online and in everyday kind of situations with the level of proficiency that we've got. So it's good if you move outside of your usual kind of spheres of interest to something that's a little bit foreign to you, and a little bit more difficult than you would usually be able to cope with, sort of on an everyday basis, because that makes us more aware of the language, because then it's not just thinking about the content. It's like if you watch 100 episodes of Friends, that's never going to challenge you, because you know the context, you know everything about the sort of thematics of that. Move outside of your comfort zone and you start to notice words and language much more. So if you can get 15 minutes a day where you see or hear something in English that's that lives up to those criteria, I think that would be good for you. Okay, I think I've said everything that I had on my piece of paper here. If you have any questions for me, you can comment back on your own officer website, or you can drop me an email, and I'll be happy to elaborate if you want me to. Okay, bye.